All right, Chuck, here we are. Racially Savvy Leadership, a real conversation. We've been talking about doing this for a while, so glad that we are finally getting the opportunity to do this. First and foremost, how you doing today?
Good, I'm doing good. It's good to be in the conversation with you as always.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So we wanted to, for those, we know we got some folks that might be tuning into this, even as we're having a conversation together. We thought it'd be good to talk about what we mean when we say racially savvy leadership and race and ethnicity. When we talk about race, oftentimes within Great Heart, we're talking about a very powerful social construct that has been developed for hundreds of years, where it's about how others view you and also how you view yourself based on your skin color and other attributes. We also know that many times this social construct is not necessarily something that's uh, proven to differentiate us biologically, but yet and still it has been something that has been developed that many people have believed in, and it affects our everyday lives, and it has very strong social implications. Ethnicity could be a very broad range of identity points, such as demographics, the area that you come from, religion, even your race, your language. All of those can be a part of your ethnicity. And then when we talk about racially savvy leadership, that's really just how we work together with other people across differences of race and ethnicity, and also recognizing racial dynamics in our country here in the U.S. and also abroad. So when we talk about racially savvy leadership, it's about how do you show up in terms of when race is something that is important, and it's always important, but when it's in front of you and when it is a conversation that must be had, something that you can't really dodge your way out of, you have to deal with it. How do you show up as a leader in those moments? Anything you want to say about that, Chuck?
I mean, I think the idea of savvy you hit, Phil, it has to do with what's going on. Are we paying attention to the ways that race is or maybe operating in us, between us, in our workplace, and as a function of leadership, it's us paying attention. And if there was ever a time for us to pay attention to race, and not in the U.S. context for sure, but beyond that, this is that time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we know there might be some people that are listening in to us have our conversation today, like, why should we even listen to these guys? Who the heck are they? So just a little bit of background on me. My name is Philip Jacobs, and I'm a consultant and a project manager at Great Heart Consulting. Not that you should even care about that. I think the thing that you should care most about is that I'm a father. I'm a father of two young black boys who are eight. One will be 8 years old, and another one is 5. And so I'm just a concerned dad. When I think about all of the systemic oppression and injustices that this country is still steeped in, even though it's been several decades since the since civil rights, and since that happened, and also since the Emancipation Proclamation and slavery, we're still deep in what I call the original sin of America. Where black people, many people of color, are still treated as less than. So, as a father, as a protector, as somebody who is definitely concerned about the future of my children, I'm showing up as a racially savvy leader to make sure that my boys grow up in a world where they're not made to feel less than because of the color of their skin, and they have just as many advantages and opportunities as anyone else.
Yeah, I appreciate the way you framed that, Phil. It certainly has to do with our work related to developing inclusive leaders. More fundamentally, I guess one of the things that we share, you're the dad of those boys, and I get to be a friend to your family, and I'm getting to know them, and I feel my own version of that for you and for them. To that part of the stake is just incredibly personal. For me, the work began early in life, and I've been around a while, as you can tell by looking at me. I was invited when I was 13 years old, a month after Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, by an African American pastor at a workshop to take responsibility for being white and becoming part of the solution and not part of his problem. So that, I think it's useful to think about the role of young people. We're certainly seeing it in this era as well. For me at age 13, the invitation to take responsibility for race, and I've learned with other aspects of who I am, other identity points, has led me, through the decades to also be thinking about how does this connect to the way that we lead every day in our organizations from whatever role we're in, right? Even if it's not a people manager role. So it's been a real joy and an opportunity, personally and professionally, for us to do some work together. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation about what has been in that and the impact that we've made. So why don't we jump into that now?
So for you, Phil, it's such a fraught time, and like you said, we've been at these conversations together and the work together for several years now. What's on your mind and heart, right now when it comes to race in the world and in the work?
So there's so many different emotions that I feel right now, or that I have felt, with the main, I guess, nuclear bomb, if you will, being what's happened with Ahmaud Arbery to Breonna Taylor to George Floyd. That is the elephant in the room that we are all still grappling with and feeling. And personally, for a while, since the whole Trayvon Martin situation up until now, I actually found myself becoming numb to hearing about police brutality and violence against people that look like me. And I think I was doing that as a way to protect myself, trying to find a way to still function in the midst of, I just didn't want to find myself feeling like a victim or feeling hopeless, so it's just kind of like you do what you got to do to keep moving and keep going. Since then, I was deeply affected by what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, for one, because I jog around my neighborhood, and it's a pretty diverse community, but I would say that the majority of the people here are white, and they see me, I see them, I wave to them while I'm jogging, and it's like not a day goes by now that when I'm running, jogging around my neighborhood, that I don't feel Ahmaud Arbery and what he was probably thinking, and just what he felt in the moment when his life was taken from him. So that's been something that I've grappled with, since what happened to him, since that occurred. And so now I'm in a place where I'm trying to find where my voice is of the best use, where my influence and my just what I can contribute, where it would make the most impact. And I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to do the work that I'm doing, because I feel like that is exactly the goal that I have in mind. As we talk about racially savvy leadership, is to help build bridges across race, so that hopefully there are no more instances like Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. So that's where I'm at right now. How about you, Chuck?
Yeah, well, I'm struck by just that practical example of just going out for a run and and having that kind of risk associated with it. Um, yeah, I can't imagine the what that's like, the price that you pay for just a day-to-day decision to do something that's healthy, right, and good for you.
Yep.
So I appreciate the challenge that is. Um, Maybe a follow-up question before I kind of talk about where I am. One of the things I've learned in my work around race over the years is, especially as a white person and as a white man, is to not expect Black people to always be the race teachers. And I think you and I have a pretty good balance on how we do that with each other. I'm interested kind of in how you're navigating that, because there are times, certainly in your work, your role here at Great Heart, and the way you and I work together, there's times where you kind of get to be representationally Black. You have a point of view, not that you speak for all Black people, but you're in service to people, including white people. And then there are those times, like you said, where that doesn't go well with numb, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. Right.
that's a really tough combination. How do you where are you with kind of that back and forth on being for other people, but having to be for yourself? And are there ways that I can support you in that?
That's a great question. Um, I would say a very important component for me lately has just been self care. So it's kind of like determining
Mhm.
which spots and conversations I choose to take on, because you can't get away from it. I mean, Black people in the U.S. just have a tremendous knowledge base about race because of our lived experience, and that is an asset, actually. And it is something that it it needs to be shared. It needs to be heard. But I also have to look at the impact of the person who's asking me, the intent of the person that's asking me to give them information about my experience. Because what I found is there's typically a few different types of reasons why people ask. The first one, which I try to steer clear from as much as possible, is the person who's looking for the quick solution to absolve their guilt for
Mhm.
whatever the guilt that they feel, just because they want to get over it. Like, let me give me the three things that I need to do to help Black people so that I can get rid of how I'm feeling. And I can feel that. And so those are the ones where it's like there's some deeper work that has to be done that I have no control over. That's a heart issue, and that is you having to deal with some things that it's just work that you have to do personally. Then there's people that I feel genuinely just they want to understand, and they want to get to a place where they can somehow empathize, or they can really be part of the solution, of changing and course correcting, um, the atrocities that have happened to us over the last 400 plus years. And so with those folks, typically there's a kindred spirit that I find with those people, with you being one, Chuck. And we're able to go in depth and have some of these conversations because there's a level of trust that's built. And so I know that when you ask me a question, you're not just asking me to absolve guilt or trying to pass the buck. You know, you're really seeking to improve and learn and be a better ally. So those are kind of like the two
Mhm.
pieces, kind of recognizing the intent of the person that's asking, and then also just for my own sanity is picking my moments when I do share, so that uh, I'm not jeopardizing my well-being.
Yeah, that's so well said. Jeopardizing sounds like exactly the right. It's like sounds like the name of the calculations you're constantly making, and which is like
Yeah.
even another layer to, like you said, to all that as a part of that lived experience, of having to even make the judgment that you just described. About intent and connection and your own energy. I think for me, um, I mean, I guess what I've been thinking about, and it's certainly seated in my life experience, is that I was invited into thinking and learning about diversity and race specifically at a time that was in many ways similar to the time we're in right now in 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated and race was absolutely on the front burner. And so it's kind of sobering, um, to think here we are 52 years later. The part I find encouraging, or at least hopeful, is that this will be a season where other people, including people who look like me, will be activated.
Yeah.
I don't quite know how that's going to turn out yet. One of the things that I have very mixed feelings about is kind of all the energy from white America about learning and listening and support for Black Lives Matter. I'm not
Mhm.
willing to like put it in like, well, that's just rhetorical. And I'm not a cynical person, and I don't doubt its power and its
Mhm.
impact. And Black lives need to matter. Black lives have always mattered.
Yeah.
Black lives need to matter 6 months from now and 4 years from now, and especially in organizational life, if it's kind of the we want to put out a press release and be seen to be supportive,
Right.
but we're not really willing to wade into what this looks like in terms of how we select and advance talent, or the way we show up in the communities that we work in, or the way we consider the implications of our commitment for people who buy our services or products,
Yeah.
then still won't make me cynical, but it will. We'll see. We'll see what kind of snapshot we get in a year from now from the energy that's in the air right now. I think at the feeling level, you use the word guilt. I um, developed pretty deeply embedded patterns of the guilt and shame stuff responses earlier in my life, and
Mm.
and have been invited for many years now to kind of let my conscience be something that essentially is a prod to move me to action, including
Mm.
learning and listening as action. So
Mhm.
I'm not spending a lot of calories on the guilt side, and uh, honestly, listening to you describe the calculations in which jeopardy is, am I going to go out of the house and go for a run in my neighborhood?
Mm.
There's no way for me to completely, kind of like step aside or deny the feeling that that still rises in me all these decades later since 1968, that people who look like me, my kind of people, are an existential threat because the people who tracked down and killed Ahmaud Arbery look like me. They identify the same way I do, both by race and gender. And we don't mean the same things by it. And I can nuance it and I can define it differently. And the reality is that um, it's I actually, another lesson I learned recently, and I talked about this, is like, do we capitalize black and white when we write it? And in my book, in
Mm.
my writing, before the last few months, I always made it small W for white, small black, B for black. And in your conversation to me about, well, I've learned that we capitalize black as a way
Mhm.
to make sure that it's inescapable. Like
Yep.
what I made of what you've told me was that blackness it must be addressed as it is.
Right.
And so there's no way I could do black capital B and white small w. So right now,
Mhm.
another at kind of how I'm feeling about is in my writing, and kind of right now in my speaking, the word white now has been capitalized really for the first time in my life, and
Mm.
I'm not sure what that means. But what it does mean is, like, I've known I was white since I was 13 years old, and I've been learning
Mm.
about that all this time, and I'm way back past 13 at this point, and here I am in this moment. Now it's capitalized, and I see
Mm.
that with other white people. I don't even quite know
Yeah.
what the implications of that are, but it feels powerful, and what I hope it will mean for me and for the work that we do is that whiteness will be something that is not, um, you know, ignored or normed away, uh, but also become something, since it is a part of who I am, and it is a part of many people's racial identity, that it becomes something that doesn't always have a word like supremacy or nationalism or pride,
Mhm.
follow that word. And
Yeah.
so I think we're
Mm.
at the and that's what to your point, we as white people get to figure out. And I don't quite know what that's going to look like because we haven't done that work yet together as white people, or ourselves, most of us individually as white people.
Yeah. That's very very powerful work. I don't envy that job, but it is crucial. For white to be redefined, because it doesn't have the best brand right now. As we know.
Not at all.
Um, yeah. So I know we had something else to bring. I can't see the prompt, so
Yeah.
uh,
So next question, maybe for us to think about, kind of focuses more on the leadership side. For you as an inclusive leader, um, how are you thinking about improving issues related to race at the kind of practical leadership level? What are you doing? What are you
mm.
thinking about? What seems to be a priority?
Well, for me, it's really just it's being real specific now, because I feel like this is a very unique opportunity in the inclusion space where issues and problems as well as opportunities for the Black community can be addressed without it being diluted with other interests or having to couple it with something else. And I've said this before many times when the issue of race comes up or the conversation of race comes up, and we've seen this in our work.
Yeah, we have.
People are very, very quick to want to attach it to something else. Well, yeah, race, but what about gender?
Yeah.
What about sexuality? What about introvert, extrovert? And right now I'm doing my best to, while being open and able to have conversations about the intersectionality, it's like, no, we need to talk about race. We need to talk about what's going on between Black and white people. There needs to be that common denominator conversation right now that stays front and center, because honestly, I feel like we get the okie doke pulled on us so many times, where when we get so close to making some type of progress,
Yeah.
then there's another part of the news cycle that jumps over it, and just to your point where, will Black Lives Matter to the greater society, the non-Black society 6 months, a year, 4 years, 20 years down the road? Will there still be these important initiatives that we see companies announcing on Twitter and how they're donating money, and is that still going to be a part of the conversation? And so I feel like there has to be that stake in the ground that says, you know what, we've been in this issue, this problem, this, America's original sin since, the 1600s. We need to stick around this topic until we really have some meaningful, not only dialogue, but solutions that come about, so that's how I've been approaching this, and again, I mean, part of my job is to be inclusive and to have a viewpoint and to be knowledgeable about all points of identity. But this one for me is personal. As you've heard me say before, I literally have skin in the game. I have two young sons that I'm raising, and they absolutely cannot grow up in a world on my watch where they feel like they feel that they are less than because of the color of their skin, and that they can be treated any type of way. And I would not be a good father, if I didn't give all of my energy and my power and my influence to changing that. So as it pertains to working with people, in within organizations, of course, as consultants, we work with our clients and work with them where they're at, and align our sometimes our personal dispositions with their overall objectives and goals. So of course, there's that flexibility that has to be made. But I think personally, internally, the clients and the projects that pique my interest the most are definitely around race and pretty much what we gonna do for Black folks. How we gonna course correct this? How we gonna get it right? So that's where I'm at right now. How about you, Chuck?
Yeah, that makes me think. I think I've been wrestling internally with I'm normally quite happy with both and thinking, because it's generative. It helps you escape the either or. And while it's clear that it's a much wider conversation, and none of us should be distilled down to one or two aspects of who we are, because none of us are just one or two aspects. All of us are way more. And indigenous people have had a parallel or similar other kind of experience to Black people in North America, in the United States. And people of other races that don't identify as white have their own experience about, vis-a-vis the white world and the history of oppression that white people have been able to structure. That said, the passion in you and in Black friends, colleagues, clients, um, is just so evident and clear to me right now. For me, the Black community has been a community of reference for my whole life. So there's a shared passion in that regard. The subtitle for my book on working with, on Leadership 101 for White Men is working with Black colleagues and customers. So I have a strong,
specific.
yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
people have said, well, why are you it's too specific? And I have the same response that you do. There's work to do between us as white and Black people, and we get to do it, full stop, period. We haven't done it enough. We have way more to do, and now's the time. It's way past time, right?
Yep.
And so, like, with punctuation, period, exclamation mark, stop. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And the and part, the next sentence doesn't start with and. It just carries on wherever that sentence takes you, right? And for me, the work, when we do it well, Black and white, in the U.S. context, will absolutely be intersectional, because each one of us, you and me, and everyone else in the conversation, where Black and white is at the heart of what we're doing, is all those other things. There are gay Black people, and there are, and there are white people who differ by ethnicity, or religion, or what sexual orientation as well. So all of that's there and present, and we need to welcome it, and we need to do it in a way that is fiercely focused on, and not permit that kind of deflection that you and I so often have seen. It's kind of like, yeah, that's important, and people will say but in the air it's really but
Right.
what about? It's like no. So for me, it doesn't sound very inclusive, and I think that's a challenge for any of us in diversity and inclusion work, is to say no. We're going to go with a but right now. We're going to say we need to talk about this, and we need to trust ourselves in a new way in the Black-white conversation. And I admit this is an American. There's an American aspect to this that doesn't translate directly, certainly, into Canada or the UK or Israel or India or Beijing. I get that. And I think there's a conversation that a Black-white conversation in the United States can open doors globally to all kinds of issues around justice and the role of law enforcement and corrections, and bigger issues in communities, and narrower issues in selection and development and retention of talent and the like on the business side. So for me, it's I don't think we quite know how to do this either, because we're better at deflecting than we are focusing.
Yeah.
And I think it's crucial that we as white people are allies to Black people in this time, because not only are we probably the chief deflectors when it comes to, but what about introverts, extroverts, as important as that is, but the allies that Black Americans in particular need to encounter in white Americans in the U.S. context is critical, because we are representative of the communities and the work interpersonally that has to get done, and has not been getting done for 400 years.
Yeah. I have a guest in here who just jumped in. No, I totally agree, Chuck, and I feel like these skills that have been and are being garnered through the Black and white dialogue are transferable. I mean, I think many of the forward progression of justice that we've seen in this country typically has oftentimes revolved around the Black struggle. I mean, we look at civil rights and how many other groups of people have benefited as a result of that civil rights. And so I think that as we get better having these conversations and coming up with solutions, it's not just, even though Black and white might be the starting point, it opens the gate to so many other opportunities to fix other systems um, that have been broken. So I totally
Yeah.
agree with you on that.
I think we definitely need to live with the accountability of how the work we need to do as black and white people opens doors to everybody, and everybody needs to
Yeah.
get in on it in their own way. I mean, we have an Asian American colleague who's talked about, issues around race and relationships of people in the Asian community to black people as well. So there's all kinds of interconnections here that we need to pursue. So last question for us today, Phil, is kind of maybe a little more personal. How do you need me to lead and support you differently than I might have 6 months ago? Because things have changed.
Um, so I got my little guy. He's always attracted like a magnet whenever daddy's on
Well,
video.
it tends to reinforce your
Um,
earlier point.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Give daddy a second, okay, and I'll help you out. Okay. All right. Thank you. Um, that's an interesting question. I think one of the most important things is, one of our one of our core skills that we talk about at Great Heart is, listen to build trust. And, trust is the making and keeping of promises over time, or it's built through the making and keeping of promises over time. And I think that um, what I would say to you is just continuing to show up. I mean, you have a legacy of that. You have a definite pattern of that, and I think it's just continuing to show up and be present, with what's happening. I mean, because I can remember, a couple years ago we had a conversation about reparations, and we had a very different uh, understanding and also just thought process on how important that was, and what it could potentially mean. And so now, with that conversation coming more to the forefront
Mhm.
and looking like it's becoming more of a viable thing, I've seen you adjust how you feel about it and how you think about it. So I think continuing to show that flexibility and that nimbleness, where you can say, I didn't, I'm still learning, I'm still growing, and how do we continue to evolve this conversation? How do I continue to show up? And in this moment right now, I mean, it's not like a specific, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. It's just, continue to dig your heels in, and just um, be present and, I guess, up to date and staying current, with how
Yeah.
fluid this thing is right now, because it's changing daily.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I'm probably at risk for having the patterns of having been in this for a long time, and I did just get last week the book from Here to Equality, which is a new book about, but the whole book is about reparations, the history of the reparations movement, and the case for it. So that's pretty. I'm a couple chapters in and gonna keep making my way, and I'm sure we'll keep talking about it. I think for me, what I probably need in terms of our reciprocal relationship, and how I hope you'll keep leading in the next 6 months, is kind of to do what you talked about earlier, is to build that balance between self-care and the speaking out. I've noticed, like in the calls recently we've had with Black clients, and that there are times when the two of you, or you and other Black folks on the call, just really get going with your common opportunities, your common sense of challenges, the care that you take for each other, and I just think there's at a human level, it's a wonderful thing to see. It's an honor to be able to be kind of in the room, so to speak. And I also think from a business perspective, the way you're connecting with Black people right now is um, it's demonstrating what the racially savvy leadership looks like, inside your community. And I think that's just, I mean, we always kind of struggle with, like, how do we both be ourselves individually, because no one ordained either of us to be like people who speak for white people or Black people, and how do
Yeah.
we also live with the pressure of being somewhat representational, at least in moments. And I just I really I admire how you're handling it. I grieve that you have to, but I do think that the way it's going is it's the way it needs to go, because we're kind of walking the talk with people while we're talking with them about doing work and doing the work itself. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's, I was telling somebody yesterday that it's just, the time is now. It's like,
Yeah,
I think we've had a lot of dress rehearsals in our nation where something will happen and it sparked the conversation, or it's led to some type of change. But to me, this seems like the real thing. Like,
right, right.
are we going to get in the game now, or let this moment pass us by?
Yep.
You know. So what are you doing, man? Go sit down.
So so for me, the theater analogy, the theater of one of your children being part of this is such a reminder of the motivation as well. It's like who we need to become, who we need to be in the next 6 months, the next years, is directly related to their well-being and
Yeah.
to their opportunities. And earlier you talked about what you don't want your children to have to do. So I know part of this, removing bias, deconstructing hatred, getting at the systemic nature of racism, and some of it's about the opportunity side. It's like what doors will open, as well as what are the challenges that we're trying to solve for and make go away. So, well,
Yeah.
I know we're kind of at the time we set aside, so maybe we can move on to just a few suggestions for those of you who had a chance to sit in and watch Phil and I have this conversation. We got a few ideas. Let me just cover a few that I think are crucial. One is that conflict is natural, it's inevitable, and so one of the things that we found and work through with each other, ourselves, and with clients is to really pay attention to impact. So that it's to not assume what someone's intent is, but to be able to speak about the impact, and to recognize that when we wander into difficult conversations and we have an impact that's different than what we want, that we acknowledge the impact, or we see that we've had the impact that we don't want, and we have a chance to apologize and recover. So one of the things I'm certainly seeing right now is a lot more conversation about accountability, and a lot more cause, particularly because of other things going on in the world, like a pandemic, right? That are real stressors. So attending to the necessity of conflict between us and the way that we operate to resolve that, I think is really crucial to being able to have conversations with race in view. I guess the other thing I'd say, and I think you see that, and I certainly feel it in the way you and I communicate, Phil, is the kind of the flip side of recognizing conflicts necessary and a challenge, to also understanding that validation and recognition are also crucial at just a basic human level, to recognize that what we honor and appreciate about one another is so crucial to the way we build strong relationships. So a couple thoughts about ways for us to think about having conversations across race. Let Recognize conflict may come in, and really make sure you prioritize validation and recognition in the work, because that helps us build connections and are like those small promises that we keep with each
Yeah.
other. So
Yeah.
we're just about at time, Phil. Final thoughts for me today, for folks watching, as we think about what racially savvy leadership looks like.
Well, I just want to tag on to what you said in terms of just the conflict. I feel like there is no transformation without some sort of pain, and conflict is part of that. And in order for us to develop the relationships that we need, and to have a um, to develop a track record, we have to be persistent even when there is conflict, because that is just
Yeah,
inevitable. And it's about how do we manage the conflict. And I think as we continue to evolve as people, as we evolve this conversation, we'll find that the conflicts that we were having, you know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago,
Yeah.
1 year ago are not the same, you know, and we're able to be much more civil in the way that we have conflict, and that's where the relationships really get deeper, and that's where trust is built when you have conflict with somebody and they don't leave, you know, or they don't go and begin to destroy what has already been built, you know. So that's a really big piece of it, because I just feel like there is no getting around. I mean, the folks are going to be and they already are sharing the deep wounds that they've been feeling for decades, and now have a platform to share it. Yes, there's going to be some conflict, there's going to be some hurt feelings, there's going to be some discord, but I think if we can have the presence of mind to not take it personally necessarily, and still contribute and stay in the mix, and really, I mean, you know, I know this is a mushy word, but to do our best to love each other and care for each other, I think that's what is going to help move the needle. That's what's going to change things. So if we can look at each other, if I can look at you, Chuck, as a brother, if you can look at me the same, you know, and we can see that we are part of the human race, regardless of our differences and our backgrounds, then we treat each other with respect. You know, we hold each other in esteem, and I believe that that's when we begin to see a lot of the systems begin to shift. You know, because it's people that are in charge of the systems.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that speaks so to the connection between the accountabilities that come with real human relationships and the bridge that those build together to the way we change our systems. We haven't talked a lot about on the system side. So many things we haven't talked about. We'll have a chance to in the future. But thanks for taking the time today, and hopefully what we've talked about today will be useful to other folks that have a chance to peer in on what a conversation that's a little different and that's focusing on racially savvy leadership looks like. So thanks for taking your time today, and thanks to any of you who are listening in. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chuck.
Hey, thanks.
Appreciate you.
Talk to you later.